that you just had. Now, every group that I observed and went by was getting into things that surprised them a little bit deeper perhaps than they thought, or not problems, but opportunities to really explore what the structure was. So what did you discover in there? Let's first of all, let's keep it tightly within the frame of the designer's swish in terms of eliciting the submodalities that worked, et cetera, and then we'll expand it to the other things that you may have discovered. So this group here, let's see, you guys both had auditory, is that right? Mm-hmm. And what were the two? For you it was volume and tempo also, the ones that made a difference. Okay, and Jim, what were yours, the same? Okay, so in the auditory representational system, tempo and volume, right, are often very powerful. They're as powerful as distance and color visually. So you'll often find those. Anybody run across anything like real different or real unique in terms of the submodality drivers? Paul?
Yeah, it was a little different in that the submodality driver was being inhibited by another part that was protective.
Aha, well, there's the iceberg, right? You know? So
Don't
it...
tell my secret.
Now, which part was that? One part's totally willing to share. The other part, no. Yeah.
Well, it was the way it worked out was it was a part that was protective. Just roughly, briefly speaking,
Sure.
making the long story short, it was about air raid sirens and the danger involved.
Yeah.
And if we took away the air raid siren, the danger wasn't recognized.
Right. Absolutely. You hear that air raid siren, and the first thing that should happen is an ecology flag should go up, right? So that's great. So there may be so what did you end up doing with that? Even given the part that understood that it was important.
We gave the positive part of it was the national anthem that overcame the air raid siren.
All right.
And we gave that positive part the capability of recognizing the siren as a danger and dealing with it,
right.
And then the siren could go away.
Okay. So, and that's really useful because often when you feel as if you're under threat, I mean, or potentially. Sometimes the immediate response is to contract, withdrawal, or get stressed, freak out. And when you do that, you lose your resources. So this, as building in the resources of being able to deal with it effectively, staying present, having flexibility. Good idea, right? It actually makes you more resourceful than the original response to it. All right? Good.
I noticed, thank you, the sirens and the national anthem same side by side.
Okay.
He wanted the sirens to be near me, but couldn't come.
All right. What happens if the national anthem comes closer? Well, all right, yeah.
So we just push it from where it is.
Right. Yeah. Well, and this is, again, this is about eliciting the structure that is in that person's map of the world, right? If this is sort of the maximum of it, and this is where the real problem is, figuratively, if you bring it closer, it may increase the response to it, but that isn't real somehow. It doesn't move them, right? So once you discover that, then you can deal with it the way it is rather than, artificially manipulating the submodalities.
But the only thing that when the siren is distant, the volume, because actually it starts high and
right.
it decreases
right.
and then it goes back.
So the pitch was oscillating, but when it got further away, did the volume kind of get sort of fade out too? Yeah.
Especially when the national
anthem came in, right. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that whatever you're using for a resource context, in the visual swish, it's the future self image. The auditory, sometimes it was your own spoken voice. Notice you guys over here working with jazz? Yeah. Briefly for a while, just because of the states that it elicited, the national anthem. The thing to keep in mind is whatever you use as the future target response needs to be expressive of really useful qualities, resources, attributes that are relevant to the problem state. So rather than just like, let's hear Barry Manilow because he mellows me out, you know. May or may not be relevant to the problem state. And you don't want to make this artificial. You want whatever the target is to be compelling so that they move towards it more and more. It becomes then a generative pattern. Interesting thing came up with Ron, if I could mention your structure briefly. It was also an auditory, primarily volume of voice, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And just an interesting thing that occurred, it was sort of in this location, right? Sort of up and to the right. And as information, as Gene was gathering information, he was saying that he wants to just let it go, gesturing over here. And so, you know, the first supposition is, well, maybe that would work. If we simply change locations and like this, it seems the problem is over here, and then over there it's not a problem. And this does sort of vary across the range, so you could use location as the submodality. But as Gene gathered more information, what became obvious in Ron's structure is that this was sort of a future representation, and over here was the past. So he had timelines linked in here, and it was more, that structure was more relevant to timelines and wasn't really appropriate for the swish, because as you start doing it, it's like, wait a minute, that puts it in the past, that isn't right, it's still kind of here. So it got muddy. So we had to, let's see, end up finally with volume. Was that the?
Volume, rhythm.
Volume and rhythm were the submodalities rather than location.
It did help to move it though, like,
Yeah.
because we try to cast it off this direction. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's going to be my future forever.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's
Right.
like, well, I don't want that there.
Exactly. And those of you who may not be familiar with the structure of time and timelines, we're going to get into that next, right? So then this will be, that section of the map will be a lot more obvious. That was a very interesting learning, right? What was this group over here up to? I didn't spend too much time with that. Ann and Rachel? Smells?
Well, I had Rachel led me to auditory shift.
Uh-huh.
And I guess one of the questions, and that was really successful, that was really good. A couple of questions came up for me about the generalizability of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'd like to run it. It was very much perhaps context specific.
Right.
And so I'm thinking of running it again in more general.
Good idea.
That came up as it was succeeding.
Yep. And this is really good feedback because contextualization, particularly in a swish, can be very important. One reason is that the same kind of response can be fired off from subtly different triggers in different contexts, right? An example is I worked with a guy, his issue was he drank about 30 cups of coffee a day, a lot of coffee. And so we did the swish on coffee, right? And the first, say again? Mellowed him right out. Actually, I think it was too much beer that led him to the coffee, right? It was just a behavioral substitution. It's like these AA meetings where it's all cigarettes and coffee, and they don't drink, but they got some. The initial image that he came up with that was compelling, that he really wanted to change, was the coffee pot in his little Mr. Coffee in the morning. He saw that, had to have a cup of coffee. So we used that for the cue image. Built a future self, did a visual swish, and boom, it's like, wow, think of that coffee pot? I feel resourceful. I really don't need to have any. And it was an extended program like this. He went home. He came back the next day. So I checked in. How's it going? He said, well, you know, got down in the kitchen. My wife had already poured me a cup of coffee. I saw it there in that mug and started me off, and, right? So we had to go specifically to it being in a coffee mug, right there. So in that case, there were a couple of examples. I did it with a guy once. His thing was sugar. We had to do a swish on one of those pour little canisters that pours the sugar. Had to do that one. We had to do rip open packets of sugar because he could keep doing it, right? I mean, he really wanted the whatever. He needed multiple contextual examples, right, before the brain generalized and said, oh, I get it. Sugar, right? Not just the packets, not just the thing, not just the little, right? And, you know, this is the, where is it? There is no failure, there's only feedback. I'm sure it's here on the wall somewhere, right over here. This is feedback. This isn't an indication that you didn't do it right or completely the first time. It's just that you have a vision into a more complete representation of this person's map. And it's really great that you can detect it in yourself, right? And go,
Concepts, really.
Right.
And then when we did, Rachel was, then share that one? She was wanting to jump on because she thought auditory was okay now, so she decided she wanted to work on olfactory.
Okay.
So again, very interesting learning, and questions were coming to my mind. What do I guide it through? What do I
Right.
exchange the
Right. Right.
smell for?
Uh-huh.
What do you exchange it for? And
Right.
is that elegant? Is it ecological and so on?
Right.
And is it is it really useful to get away from that, having the ability to detect that smell?
Right.
We
Yeah.
did that change, and you thought it was fairly good. It was pretty okay, I think. And then with Heinrich, he suggested another one, which was to layer in another aspect of change,
Okay.
which was to shift the context. No, sorry, to use the rep system, that's right, use the same sort of context,
Mm-hmm.
working with the person, or dealing with the person, and having a different response. So that was the switch.
So originally it was a substance or something that you would smell, or?
It was really interesting because at the very first I was like, oh, well, we'll just do this as role playing because I was
Right.
interested and
Sure.
thought it'd be interesting.
Uh-huh.
And then the more I thought about it, it was like, well, no, because sometimes I smell something, it feels like I can't concentrate.
Right.
But I'm like, what is it I do? Because I already have that one under control. Because
Yeah.
I can go, no, that's not going to bother me.
Right.
But the one that I realized I've tweaked and tweaked and tweaked, the one that I just couldn't get over is like when somebody's right in your face.
Yeah.
And like you really want to help this person, or I'm tattooing them or something, and I can't get away, and I'm trapped also
Right.
with this smell. And so it became a part of it where we did like a switch of it with like changing the smell and doing like a switch pattern, and it definitely improved it hugely. And I was
Right.
kind of like, maybe that's as good as it gets with smell, like when it's that bad and in your face and you can't get away.
Yeah.
And Henrik heard me say that, and he was like, what is it that this is to you? And we started talking about the different, like, what is it? And what I realized is that if I really love and care about somebody, I can deal with pretty well any smell. I have in the past taken care of sick people or whatever.
Right.
But these are also people who I don't particularly like, and
Right.
I can't get away from them. So then it was add a layer of compassion in there,
Right.
into the soup, mix it in, and then I can deal with it.
Great.
It's like, wow.
Cool.
Really neat.
Well, this is interesting because, in a sense, you kind of mirrored a pattern we're going to do tomorrow called adjusting criteria using submodalities. That you found a higher criteria than the irritation or the runaway or the not liking. And the higher criteria was compassion. And when the compassion was there, and you had this other smell thing going on, then, wow, right?
Yeah,
Neat.
really cool.
Very nice.
Especially for something that started off as a role-playing exercise.
Yeah. Well, there are no accidents. The unconscious, well, I'll just role play this thing. It's not a big uh-oh. Right. Excellent, excellent. Other discoveries about the swish. Again, I want us to backtrack on this because we've devoted a fair amount of time to this. We've reviewed submodalities this morning, real small chunk things. And I've been just sort of thinking about the group. I want you to acknowledge yourselves because you have come from a 3-day, really complex structure with David Gordon, right? In then a couple of days off going, into a very small chunk environment this morning. So it's a real stretch, right? To attend to these specific small chunk things called submodalities and begin to link them together in patterns. And the primary one that we've reviewed today, we did a sort of standard swish review, and then we explored the designer swish, working with whatever your client offers you. What I'd like you to do is take a moment and do a little as-if future pace. I want you to kind of travel forward in time, beyond the closing of the residential, 2 months down the road, 3 or 4. And imagine being with someone, whether you work one-on-one normally with people, or this could be a member of the family, or someone that you meet that becomes very obvious that what's the problem is this trigger. Something fires off, right? And wow, submodalities, the swish. And I want you to simply allow yourself to fully experience running this person through a swish. So imagine who it might be, what their problem might be, what they might communicate to you. And then you go into that sort of perceptive NLP mode to elicit the pattern, find out how this is related to submodalities that intensify or decrease the response. And as you do this, I want you to build in a great deal of elegance on your part so that you have the sense that this just flows naturalistically, almost conversationally. You find out whatever the trigger is and code that in submodalities, and then some representation of resource. Run them through the swish. Just having a sense that by the close of this residential, all of those qualities of yours will be right there with you. That smoothness and elegance, that integration of all the skills, a deep familiarity with submodalities and how they work, coupled with language patterns and so many other things you'll be exploring soon. So that 2 months down the road, or 3 or 4, just begin to be aware of who you're becoming. It's kind of like generating your own future self-image. That's who you're becoming in the world of NLP and your skills, your ability to impact others in a really powerful, useful way. Just begin to get a sense of the qualities of that future you, even though you may not even know the kinds of things you're going to be learning in the weeks to come, or the days to come. You know the qualities of self that will be represented there in 3 or 4 months. And those will only grow and become more. You have a sense of yourself extending into the future, integrating all of this in more and more elegant, aesthetic, powerful ways. And as you get a sense of that vision, I'd like you to come a little bit closer to home, deeper inside yourselves right now, to acknowledge the aspect of you that is doing this learning, the one that sees value in it, the one that is willing to pursue the learning, to go through the discomfort of learning, to stretch your own comfort zone, the boundaries of your own map of reality, so that you can enter into the maps of realities of others, to generate more fruitful lives, more productive realities, and share in that process. So take a moment to acknowledge that aspect of you that is sitting in this chair right now, and in fact is the one that brought you here. It's also the one in the future, being expressed more and more fully. All right? When you have a complete sense of that, just allow yourselves to come back here into the room. And we'll have an opportunity tomorrow morning, other times tomorrow, to explore some other kind of fine points that are associated with things like the swish. Right? We talked to some folks about kinesthetic swishes and how to do that. We'll do some patterns that link to that. But for the final half hour that we have today, what I want to begin to explore is the nature of time. Right? Let me ask you this, first of all. How many of you in your practitioner training explored timelines? Right? Is there anyone who did not in their practitioner? Is there anybody who doesn't remember it well? Well, let's do a quick review. We're all familiar in NLP with the whole notion of doing, quote, timeline work, right? And timeline work in the evolution of NLP literally grew out of a study of submodalities, right? Originally, submodalities were kind of like, things that produce things like the swish and the phobia trauma procedure and things like that. They were specific behavioral level things. But really, it was almost tracking on this question of how do it know that led to an exploration of how people code time using submodalities. How do you know that something is likely to occur next week versus something already happened a month ago? How do you know which is which? How do you not get confused between what's going to happen and what's already happened? There are people who do this. There are people who get confused between what they've already done and what they anticipate doing. And there's some real specific reasons that they may get confused in this. And it can have to do with the way that they structure time at the level of submodalities. So when we talk about working with timelines, we're talking about some real sort of bedrock structures in the human consciousness. I mean, our expression of time and how we participate with it is a very profound aspect of our reality, right? It sorts out a great deal for us. So let's first explore the structure of time. Some of you may have done this in your practitioner training. We're going to elicit, for the group, I'll kind of run everybody through it. We're going to elicit the structure of your timeline utilizing submodalities. And just to get a sense of what this is like, the first thing I'd like everyone to do is imagine an orange. One orange, orange. Just picture that. Just an orange. And that's pretty easy to do, is see an orange. Now I want you to see two of them. Imagine two oranges. And three oranges. Everybody do three oranges, right? All right, let's make it difficult. Let's keep the three oranges up there. See three oranges and an apple. Three oranges, one apple, and a banana. Wow, how many is that? Three oranges, an apple, and a banana. See them all at once. How many you got? Five, exactly. That's, whew, boy, hard work. But we can all do that. In other words, you can let the fruit go there for a moment. What you just did is you had five simultaneous representations. You thought about five different things all at the same time, right? We're going to do something very similar, but the things that we're going to think about all at the same time are moments in time, experiences, moments in time, like they were apples or oranges. We're going to do it in the following way. I want you to think of something that you do habitually every day, a characteristic, some real simple behavior. This could be brushing your teeth. This could be taking a shower. This could be putting on your shoes or having breakfast. Just something that you do pretty much every day and that you've done for many years and that you're likely to do for many years more, right? For demonstration purposes, I'll use the example of brushing your teeth, right? So some simple behavior that you've done for a long time, you've done today or in the immediate past, you know, and that you're likely to do ongoing in the future, all right? So pick the behavior, and then what I want you to do, just like one orange, I want you to think about the most recent time you did this. Just have a representation of that, a memory of it. So if it was brushing your teeth, for me, I'd see myself maybe with my face in the mirror in the condo this morning. And I'd, okay, there it is. That's my first representation. Everybody got that? All right? Now I want you to leave that up there just like you did the first orange, and I want you to think about having done the same behavior 2 weeks ago, right? So now you're going to have two representations, like two oranges. This is you doing the behavior 2 weeks ago. Brushing your teeth, showering, whatever it is. So now you have two of them up there, and just let them sort themselves out wherever they feel right for you. You got two. Let's move on to three. Let's go a time in the past about 2 months ago when you did this. So now you'll have three. You'll have a memory or a representation of this simple behavior 3 months ago, 2 weeks ago, and in the near present. And just let them pop up wherever they do. And as this happens, I want you to be aware of how you're coding these experiences, these representations with submodalities. In other words, brightness can be important. Movement or lack of movement, you know, these little submodality things, particularly visual submodalities. And the one specific one I want you to track on is location of these representations. We have 3 now. We're going to get a 4th, and this one's going to be a year ago, right? 1 year in the past. Let that one come up and slide into the other 3. So you've got a year ago, 3 months ago, 2 weeks ago, and now. All at once, like 4 oranges. And you want to notice, is there any difference in color over time or movement over time? Brightness, and specifically how they sort themselves out with location. Where are they in the theater of your mind? And finally, we'll do one more in the past, let's say 5 years ago. You don't have to remember exactly where you were. That's not so important, but just a sense of 5 years ago you were brushing your teeth or doing whatever. Let that representation come up, kind of stabilize in relationship to the others. It's there. You want to be aware of the kind of internal location of all these images 5 years ago, a year, 3 months ago, 2 weeks, in the near present. Notice if there's any differences in things like color, brightness, movement, but particularly location. Then just let all of those past experiences stay where they are, just like a bunch of oranges. And now we're going to think apples. I want you to think about doing the same behavior, but this time 2 weeks in the future. Just imagine yourself doing whatever it is 2 weeks from now. You're likely to still be up here at Beaver Village, but it's going to be 2 weeks from now. So pop up that future image, the representation. Let it settle in where it feels natural for you. And once you've got 2 weeks in the future, we're going to jump ahead to 3 months in the future. So residential's over, you're back home or wherever. This is 3 months in the future, same day-to-day behavior. Notice where it fits in. And again, notice now all of them, any submodality differences, in addition to location, like brightness or movement or color, any of that. Size even of the images. We'll do another one in the future, let's say a year in the future. Let that one come up. You don't even have to know precisely where you're going to be, but just a sense of the anticipation of this behavior a year from now. Let that come up. Notice where it fits in. And then we'll go one more to 5 years in the future. Same simple behavior. And let it slide in, fit wherever it would like to fit and feels comfortable for you, feels right. And you've got a full display there from 5 years in the past to 5 years in the future. And get a sense of the internal geography of this, sort of the arrangement of these representations spatially. And sort now for other submodalities like color, brightness, movement, size, those kinds of things. And I want you to let yourself remember that structure. And what I'm going to ask everybody in the group to do is we're going to begin with all of those past images, the past. I want you to take one hand or another, one arm, and I want you to point physically to where all those past pictures are, or what direction they are. Where are they located in the theater of your mind? Just take your hand until it just feels like you're kind of pointing towards all those past pictures. All righty. Great. We've all got that? Pretty much. Rachel, have you got a sense of those? Okay, we'll come back to that. Now take your other hand and point to where the future images are, sense of the future, wherever those images are. All right. The future, Alessandra, have you got the sense of those? We're pointing, okay, gotcha. Great. All right, now, open your eyes, look around the group. You'll notice that no one is just going like this, right? Except Alessandra, or Rachel, we'll be back there in just a second. We've got specific locations or an internal structure of these images, right? For how many people is the past off to their left, kind of? All right, that's about right, about 90%. And the others, this is, how many is it the past off to the right? We got 2, right? It's, in this group size, that's about right. It turns out, one of these commonalities of submodalities, about 80-85% of folks have their past oriented structurally somehow off to the left. And there are nuances, right? And their future somewhere off to the right. Sometimes there's a reversal where it's just the opposite. Let me ask you, I haven't tracked on this, Anwar and Paul, do you know if your eye accessing cues are reversed also? Remember visual construct? Yours are consistent? They're the sort of the normal, this is visual remember, this is for you. That could be, that's a possibility. Do you know if Paul, if your eye accessing cues are reversed? What color is your mother's eyes?
Geez, I don't remember. I think she had brown eyes.
Okay, what color is your car?
My color is a blue color. It looks sort of greenish blue.
Okay, what color is the upholstery in your car?
It's blue.
Okay. You've seen my eyes up close. What color are my eyes? You can't see them from there, so remember.
They seem to be blue.
Okay, and which one is the bluest? And he's going externally here. All right.
Left eye is blue.
Which one of your eyes is the darker?
Darker.
Yeah. Look at yourself in the mirror.
I would say the left eye.
Okay, cool. What is your favorite color shirt? Okay, interesting. I would explore this a bit more with Paul. What I'm beginning to pick up is a pattern that his visual remembered is off to the left. Right? I'm not convinced of it absolutely yet. I want to explore more. But he's saying that the timeline is somewhat, it's the other way. His past is over here, his future is over here. So we'd want to explore that just because there's some neat nuances there. Let me ask this. How many, I think I saw a gesture over here. Does anyone have the past like behind them? We got two folks with it back here. And the future for you guys is where? Kind of like yours is up to the right, up to the right, up to the right, and the past is back behind you to the left. All right? So it's lateralized left and right, but the past is more like directly behind you, and the future is kind of up here. Cool. Let me ask for the whole group, any other kinds of submodality differences did you notice? I mean, is there any difference in brightness between past and future or movement? Paul, what do you got going?
Future was much more difficult for me to get any kind of colors. In fact, much more, the further out we went,
Right.
the less I was, the more trouble I had getting colors. And,
All right.
and
How about the past? Was it colorful?
the past was colorful. The past was pretty easy.
All right. Great. So a rich representation of the past, he says pretty easy, a lot of color, the future not so much. How about other folks in terms of color, brightness? Anwar?
The present is very faded, very small, very dark.
Uh-huh.
And the past is big, bright, clear.
Big, bright, and clear in the past. Uh-huh. Interesting. Others, I see some head nods. Other people like that? Or Anne?
The past is dark bluish, and when you get to 5 years, it's really dark.
Uh-huh.
Whereas the future is bright and clear and it kind of higher.
Yeah?
It's lighter.
Right? Okay. So some feeling differences about this, but
Yellow.
yellow, and we got dark blue, and it fades after 5 years, and it's kind of behind you. Anwar's, on the other hand, your past is big and bright, and okay. Gene?
The future is definitely more colorful and brighter.
Right, and he's showing you precisely where it is. I mean, his words are saying it, but look at his gestures. You know exactly where it is.
And then the past is more faded.
Right?
More faded, and this 5 years out is closer than 5 years
Past the five, so it's like, sort of like the past timeline kind of stretches out, and there's more of an immediacy in terms of space in the future. Same with Anne, Georgi, same. All right? Yeah.
I've got a question.
Okay.
I choose to take a shower,
Mm-hmm.
for example,
Right.
and I'm not sure, but how can I distinguish the light of the places? Because for me, the past
Right.
was here,
Huh?
and I usually take a shower here without light.
Okay.
And in the future, I think I've got a new home.
Right. So nice
with
bright lights.
brighter.
Yeah. If you wanted to explore those submodalities, I would pick maybe a different behavior or a larger section of time. Like maybe start checking out, a time when you took a shower 6, 7 years ago, or back when you were a kid, or because there's no limits on how far out you can move with these timelines, or think 20 years from now when you might be, and get a larger sampling, right, to see if there are any not contextually bound submodality differences. Okay, Rachel, what's going on here? I don't know. You don't want to talk about it? All right. So just out of curiosity, something's coming up with it, or? Great. Okay, cool. Time. Now, how many people have a sense that there's a real precise, I want you to, we only did like 5 years, like 4 in the past and 4 in the future and some right in the present kind of thing. I want you to kind of extend this, kind of like one of those connect the dots thing. Let your past extend into the distant past, however you experience it. In the future, go off into the distant future. And really become internally sensitive to the specific kind of structure. We've talked about left and right and kind of up and behind you as big chunks. But I want you to notice with real exquisite internal sensory acuity if there are real nuance differences. Does it bend in any way? Are there hills and valleys? Does it go around a corner? Are there segments maybe of your past that are dark, right, that are obscure, and then some that are bright? Are there areas in your future that might have the same thing, some brighter than other? You get just a sense of a real kind of precise calibration or read on what the explicit structure of the timeline is.
I don't know if it makes any difference, but as I look at each one of these instances in time, initially it comes right up here.
Right.
And then it goes there because it's past.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Right.
have difficulty with the future in that I'm not seeing too much, the more distant future.
Right.
But it's still, whatever it is.
It goes over there. Yeah. That's kind of an accessing strategy, right? I mean, it's like, okay, I say 5 years in the future, you get 5 years, and where does it fit? Oh, it fits in relationship, it fits over there. Right. Yeah. All right, now, just for fun, I want you to move, doesn't matter, one arm or, actually, let's just take one hand, and we'll start in the past, and I want you to describe the configuration of your timeline. Start way in the distant past, maybe, pretend it's when you were born, and just kind of, what does it do? What does your timeline do? What kind of movement does it have? Is it just a totally straight line, or is there structure to it? All right, so as you do this, you can look around the room too and notice that there are some real subtle kinds of differences. That it's not just a line like a railroad track. Salud. Por nada. All right. So, what we've done here is utilized our knowledge, our awareness of submodalities to begin to get a sense of the nature of the structure of time. Right? And timelines, as I was saying, form the basis for a lot of really powerful NLP techniques. Certainly. What we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to explore with modifying our timelines in specific ways. We're going to find out what certain timelines are good for, right? And how you can make changes in timelines to affect certain goals and outcomes. So it's going to be kind of an exploration first thing tomorrow morning, and then we're going to begin to explore when changing the way a person codes time could be useful. Because there are certain ways that you code time that can get you into trouble or that can generate unpleasant responses. So we'll be exploring those tomorrow. So what I'd like you to do this evening is just, spend some time with your timeline. Just to, let things come up and get a nature of the structure of it. I remember the first time I did this, it kind of explained a lot because I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s when I was exploring timelines for the first time. And verbally, when I would talk about my life, I would talk about either periods or chapters of my life. Well, that was the chapter about my life when I was going to college. Or, I was living up here in the Rockies, and that was, that epic, that period of my life. It was like everything was kind of chunked, When I did my timeline thing, it was really remarkable because I would have these sort of contextually bound, I mean, literally, everybody familiar with these things I used to have called pop beads? They're a plastic jewelry that pops together. My timeline was like pop beads, right? And they were like little self-contained spheres. Here's the college days, here's the young wild days, here's this. And they were all these little kind of chapters or epics, these little bubbles that had a little connection, right? Which I found really remarkable. It explained a lot about the way that I thought about the past and who I was and how one thing changed to another. Because sometimes it seemed really abrupt. I would pop out of one bubble into another and make these major changes. But when I understood that that's one of the ways I was structuring time, it began to clear up a lot. So I'd like you, just as an exploration tonight, to explore this notion of timelines in relationship to how you know yourself, what kind of person you are. Are you motivated towards the future? You know, are you interested in things of the past? Think about the kind of a timeline a historian must have. You know, someone who's interested in ancient cultures and histories and how that might be coded. I worked with a friend years ago, and his timeline was remarkable. He was a geologist, and we went on an expedition to the subarctic outside of Frobisher Bay in Canada. And this guy could look at these amazing granite rock formations, and he was seeing 75 to 80,000 years of time. Literally. I mean, I was seeing some pretty rocks, right? This guy could track on the transforms of that. Literally, because of his specialization, he experienced time and the environment in a way that was unapproachable to me. And when we kind of explored that, it was just really remarkable what was going on inside of him. So I want you to just explore timelines tonight, kind of as it relates to who you feel yourself to be, and, you know, what draws you in the future, what, you know, draws you to the past or repels you from the past. And then we'll put all that material to work tomorrow morning as we explore enhancing timelines, perhaps changing timelines, and like that.
Tom, sorry, I just wanted
Yes.
to raise a question about association.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you go to places or want to avoid places.
Right. Exactly. Sure. Yeah.
So I just wondered if you want to...
We'll get into that at length tomorrow. I mean, there's ways that we, for example, unpleasant past experiences that we code with submodalities that tend to dissociate us, right? And we found some of those during our exploration this morning when we were dealing with them. Certain submodality changes, if you make it dark, for example, and it's still, there's no movement, little frame around it, very difficult to associate. So some people spontaneously, unpleasant memories from the past, that's how it's not like they have amnesia, it's just like they don't go in there, right? Other people, or the same people, have really wonderful experiences from the past, real rich, good feelings. And so when they remember them, they don't remember them how they happened, they're actually brighter, they're actually bigger. You know, there's sort of more music at the carnival than there really was, and they engage in it. Because they've made submodality changes that actually draw them, compel them back to those memories. Right? And that's the class of information that we'll explore tomorrow. All right, prior to closing